Music theory, the fretboard as planet Earth. Paradigm shift. Objective to enlighten learners about how the fretboard should be visualized like planet Earth, helping learners navigate musical space with clarity. So as we're learning to navigate the fretboard, we want to visualize the fretboard as the territory or a map of the territory. Why? Because that's what it is, because that's the easiest way to learn it, and because it basically gamifies the process, similar to learning, say, a video game that has a map involved, like Zelda, for example. Now, I know I'm old. Pick your favorite video game with a map involved. The way that you master that video game is to basically learn the map of the territory, learn where the locations are, what those locations do, and how to get to each location from all of the other locations. That's, in essence, what we want to be doing on the guitar. The way most people learn the guitar is not optimal to learn all the locations on the guitar. We'll talk more about that shortly. This analogy will challenge traditional note-based thinking and offer a more intuitive, modal-centered approach. Now, don't turn away just because you heard modes there. Most people, when they hear modes, they say, look, I'm in advanced school. I don't want to deal with modes. I want a simple kind of process. But realize one of the simple kind of processes you will learn out there is possibly something called the Nashville number system, where they basically took the modes and just assigned a number to them that don't change. And oftentimes people talk about that system as though it's a hack, as though it's a shortcut, an unsophisticated way to be doing the system, not in the sophisticated, like scale-centered type of approach. This is where the paradigm shift is, people. That's not true. The modal-based system is the best way, the most intuitive way to look at the fretboard, and it also is the way to look at the fretboard within context. In other words, when we're actually playing music, or when we're thinking about a scale, or we're thinking about a chord, there is always context. And in Western music, the context is typically a collection of 7 notes out of a 12-note collection. And those 7 notes are all going to have the same relationship to each other, such as the 7 continents on the planet. So we'd like to assign some kind of absolute numbering system and or naming convention, the naming convention being the modes, which are intimidating because they have ancient Greek labels or names, but don't let that throw you off. That is actually the easier way to be seeing it. And when we look at it by notes, notice the notes are not going to be able to help us within the context of what we're trying to do as we map out the territory. All right, the 7 continents, the 7 modal nodes. So think of the 7 diatonic modes: Ionian, Dorian, Phrygian, Lydian, Mixolydian, Aeolian, Locrian, which you could give a Nashville number system to 1 through 7. And those are going to be the locations on the map. Now, I know they look kind of scattered all over the place, 1, 2, 3, 4. That's because I mapped it out on a fretboard. So the number system that I came up with doesn't try to rank the continents or anything like that. It's just how it happened to work out if you try to map this out on the fretboard. The point is, we want to be thinking about continent to continent locations. Now, also realize that this analogy works on a guitar in particular, because on a guitar we have multiple different strings. So although pitch only goes one way, we can think of it as a note number line going up or back, or we can think of it as a circle going around in a circle. The guitar also has multiple different strings on it, so we have to map the same territory on multiple different strings. So this modal nodes are the fixed structure landmarks that maintain their shape no matter the key. So in other words, it doesn't matter what key we're playing in. There are 12 keys in Western music. Once we identify the key that we're playing in, the relationship between the nodes, between the planets, will remain the same. And this is not what you would think. This is totally obvious, but this is not what most people do. Most people learn all of the positions on the fretboard without any context. There could be use to that, but it's going to be way more difficult, and you're not really learning it within context of anything musical. You might as well learn the context of something musical, and we're always going to be using in Western music almost all the time a collection of 7 notes. You can break it down to 5 notes from there, but even that is derived from the 7 notes. and they're always going to have the same relationship to each other. It would be like having a color palette where all the colors are kind of related to each other, and then you change the entire color palette, but all the related hues are kind of the same. That's what we basically have here. So just like continents don't shift as the Earth rotates, these modes stay locked in relative position across the fretboard. So the idea is the planet's going to rotate around. So we're going to assign it 12 degrees of rotation as the planet is rotating around. But when we actually play, we're going to go onto the planet, and I no longer want to be measuring where I am when my fingers are actually on the planets of the fretboard as though there's a grid from space, right? I want to be actually on the planet and look at the latitude and longitude of the map that I'm on. In other words, if you think about our Zelda video game, if we had the grid hovering over the planet, and every time you play the video game, the locations are in a different place, that would be a problem. Now, what about the oceans? Well, the oceans are going to be the other 5 locations. Now, look how beautifully this works out. If you're an American, you probably might not even know that there's 7 continents and 5 oceans. We don't have the best, school system here, but there are. So the analogy works great. You've got 7 continents and you've got 5 oceans that get to our 12 different locations. Now, note that you don't always have to go through an ocean to get to the other continents. So we have Europe going over to Asia here. So that means there's not always an ocean between, the continents that we're going to be looking at. But we have 5 oceans and 7 continents. So the 5 notes outside the diatonic system are like the oceans between the continents. So you can travel through them, but they are not home base. So in other words, we're always in Western music picking one of 12 7-note collections that we're going to be working in, which are equivalent to the 7 continents, which we can give a Nashville number, permanent number system to, not a scale degree changing number system to, or we can name them by the nodes given to us by the Greeks with the Greek names of them. And then the ones that aren't in those 7-note collection are the ones in between. Those are the oceans. They're always going to be in between, always a half step down or a half step up. But there's not an ocean between each of the notes in the collection of 7 notes. So this highlights the function or chromatic tones as transitional spaces rather than stable destinations. So we still want to be able to identify the oceans are there, but that's not where we want to spend most of our time. We're usually going through the ocean, and at some point we need to hit a landmass. Why? Because we're human beings, okay? We need to be on an actual planet. So if you visualize the fretboard this way, it's like playing a video game. You can master it. And you can master it within the context. It's still difficult, but it's totally doable. For most people, the problem is they're visualizing the system incorrectly, and they're taking on way more work in a way that's not contextual and therefore not fun, not gamified, and not optimal. Notice that this system kind of works well on a guitar because there's actually multiple strings. But if you think about it from a pitch system, the notes are actually, we don't have directions, meaning if I go from the North America over here to Asia, I could go this way, or I could go straight through this way, for example. But the way the pitch system basically works is that all the continents would be like in order. They're in a circle like a racetrack, or like you're going around a block that just goes around in a circle. So it looks something like this. Remember, the numbers don't mean anything in terms of the continents. It's just how I mapped it onto the fretboard one time. But let's say we're on continent number 2. If I want to get to Antarctica over here, continent number 5, if I put it in a circle, notice I don't need to say go left at the grocery store, go left at the glacier or something like that, and go right when you hit this or whatever. You just need to say it's a block system. So I'm going clockwise or I'm going counterclockwise. All I need is distance and direction, clockwise or counterclockwise. And then I can measure it using 2 different methods that we have here, either destination locations, meaning if I'm on to South America, I can go continent to continent. So I can go 1, 2, 3 continents up. Or I can count the oceans. I can go here 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. The continent to continent would be as though we're going from place to place in our collection of 7 notes, which are always in order. And if I add the oceans, that would be like I'm going up by note. Now, there's a problem with this in that the scale degree system doesn't measure properly. It causes this to be the 1. So this would be the 1, 2, 3, 4. That's the 4th. When it should be 1, 2, 3. 3 notes up within our collection of 7 notes. That's going to cause us all kinds of problems we'll talk about later. But note, it's still just simply a measuring system, measuring from this point, either in terms of the notes in order of the collection of notes, typically going clockwise as the default, or including all the notes. Now, if I go forward, 1, 2, 3, I could also go counterclockwise. 1, 2, 3, 4. So -4 notes within the collection of notes, which I'm going to call modal half steps backwards, or I can add the oceans backwards. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 backwards. So that's as easy as basically it gets. It's easier than a map of like a Zelda territory, for example. Now, what's the problem with the system? Normally, if we think about this grid as in space, our head is above the fretboard, we're looking down at the fretboard, and we can imagine it's rotating around similar to the world rotating around. The fretboard is rotating because there's 12 different collections of 7 notes. So if I look at this fretboard, I've got E, A, D, G, B, E, frets 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. If I look at the G string, fret 4, that would be this B. The problem is this is not latitude and longitude that's on the actual planet. We're hovering above the planet, and therefore if I have a different collection of notes as the planet spins to a different degree, I can still label that a B and be accurate, but it no longer lands on a continent. See, it's not contextually helpful for me. If I was to shoot a laser from space to the planet, I would have to know the degree of rotation in order to know when I'm going to hit something, right? But what I really want to do is to note the degree of rotation and then go to the actual planet itself and then use latitude and longitude. See, this would be like playing, the way most people learn the system, it would be like playing Zelda or whatever your favorite video game is that has a map in it, but the grid line that tells you the latitude and longitude of the locations on the map is not on the Earth, it's hovering in space. Therefore, every time you log into the game, the latitudes and longitudes which are telling you where things are located are changing because the world is spinning and you're using a grid that's hovering in space. That would not be an easy game to play. That would complicate things beyond measure. It doesn't make any sense. What you want to do is, if you're actually on the planet, which our fingers are on the planet, is to measure latitude and longitude from the planet, and we only use the degrees of rotation to tell us where we are on the planet, right? It just orients us to the location on the planet. Then we no longer use the note names. We use the equivalent of the continent names once our fingers are on the fretboard, which would be the Nashville number system, permanent 1 through 7, or the Greek names. So let's give another example to see what I mean. The 12 points of rotation equal the chromatic note wheel. So picture the Earth viewed from space with a 12-note compass overlying it. So this is the 12 notes. We have 12 notes. That's our degree of rotation. Here's the entire, our fretboard mapped out because we have multiple strings on the fretboard, unlike the piano. And this is the continent. We're imagining this is the continent underneath. So that this is us looking at latitude and longitude, but it's not connected to the planet. It's hovering over the planet. The planet is the green space. So then each point represents one of the 12 chromatic notes, A through G sharp. And so that's 12 notes. When you change key, you rotate this wheel, but the internal modal framework, the continents, remain the same. So what happens as the world spins? Well, our fretboard is on top of it. So as the world spins, this shape is moving up. Notice over here that this shape, if I was to measure the distance from E to B, I can say that's a 5, 6, 7, a 7-note away distance. That's great to memorize, but it's not really helpful in context now because although that distance is the same, it doesn't really help me in the context of the continents as they're currently positioned. And in Western music, we're always working on 7-note collections that are basically parallel to each other. So the important thing now is not the relationship between E and B, but the relationship between F and C. The important thing now is not the relationship between F and C, but between F sharp and C sharp. See how the important thing is the related continents. The notes, if you memorize all the notes on the fretboard, that could be a good thing to do, but it's really only telling you like where your point of focus should be so that you can locate where the continents are. Once you find the continents, it would be much more optimal not to communicate by note names anymore, but by communicate by the continent names that stay fixed. Let me show you what I mean. This is the same thing. We're going to go through the 12 different rotations, this time looking at a fretboard that's in the key of A. We're in the key of collection of notes related to A major, and then we'll go through from A to G sharp, all the collection of notes, and you'll see how the shapes are going to shift to the right. So the red happens to be the 1, the 1, 3, and the 5 are going to be the colored notes. We'll talk more about that later, but you can see how they shift up. So what is important here? Here's the note name, A, which I'm going to call 1 from a number system, and here's the continent name from a Nashville number system, a 1, or from the Greek name, an Ionian. And you can see the relationship here to this is going to be an F sharp, and that's the note name. The continent name is Aeolian, and it would be a 6 from a Nashville number system. Now let's say I move up to the next collection of notes. The world has spun. So now the collection of notes is around this A sharp. But that's not the important thing. The important thing is the continent is now the Ionian continent, which from a Nashville number system is the 1. Notice that this A over here, you saw this relationship between the A. That's great, but that's not really important anymore because this A was the Ionian continent, but now because the world spun, this A is now the Locrian continent, or continent number 7. So what I want to do is use the note names to say, look, I'm going to say that I'm in the key or the point of rotation of an A sharp now, so that I can then locate the continent of the Ionian, or Nashville note system number 1, and then everything is relative to that position. That's the way we want to see the fretboard. See, if I move up here, now that A is in the ocean. It's no longer even there. The Ionian is what I want to see. Now I'm in the key of B, or the collection of notes, 7 notes from B major. So here's that same position this way. The note A is not the focal point anymore. Now we're going to go up to C. So now we're in the 7-note collection of C major. This A is still there now, but it's no longer the Ionian. Now it's the Aeolian, or the 6th. We want to see it as the 6th. That's how I want to name it. And now the Ionian is over here at the 1. If we go then to the next one, that would be at C sharp would be the Ionian. So the A is now in the ocean. The A is not even relevant, or it's part of the ocean in this context. We go to the D. Now the A is in this 7 collection of notes, but the A doesn't help us if you just call it an A typically. We want to say, no, that's the 5th. That's the Mixolydian node now. That's the Mixolydian continent. Why? Because the world turned. We're on the 6th degree of rotation out of 12, which is the collection of notes around the D major, which means that the D is now the Ionian, or the 1st, which makes the A the 5th. See, so if I remember all the notes, it doesn't help me because it's not in context. The notes are going to tell me the context so I can memorize the relative positions of the nodes. So again, if I go up here, now I'm on D sharp, or the 7th degree of rotation. A is in the ocean. Now I'm on the 8th degree of rotation. This is the Ionian. Now the A is in there, but now it's continent number 4. It's a different continent, same location, different continent. It's the Lydian continent. So now we're in rotation 9. The A is there, but now it's the Phrygian, or the 3 continent. So now we're in rotation 10, F sharp. This is the Ionian. The A is now in the ocean. Now we're in rotation 11, the G. This is the Ionian. The A is there, but now it's the Dorian. So you see what the point is, that if we're basically normal people are learning the fretboard just like all the notes and all the relationships from all the notes with no context. And if you learn it with no context, it's gonna be way harder. You're gonna get frustrated because it's not the optimal way to learn it, and because you're not actually achieving any goal. You're not seeing it in relation to the notes. There are always 7 note collections in Western music, and that's what you want to see it from. So use the degrees of rotation, and then try to name everything that you're doing by basically the Nashville number system, 1 through 7, which is basically the node system. So when you say you're on the A on the top string of the guitar on the 5th fret, you might say that, no, I'm on the Aeolian node. I'm on the 6th of the top string of the guitar, which happens to be on the 5th fret. So try to switch your terminology, because that is saying it within context. That's going to be the key. So we don't want to be in space. I want to then go on to the actual continent and no longer have the grid from space, which is the note names. The note names are the grid from space that aren't connected to the planet. I want to know the latitude and longitude as I'm on the planet, and I'm actually rotating with the planet. When I'm playing Zelda, I'm on the planet. I want latitude and longitude from the perspective of me as I rotate around with it on the planet, right? It doesn't help me to look at latitude and longitude from the perspective of space as the planet rotates underneath a grid through 12 degrees of rotation, right? So traveling around the block. So once again, we could see this as a block format from a pitch perspective. Movement within a scale is like walking around the city block. So if I have the 7 collection of notes, if I go from note number 2 and I then go to like note 4, I'm going around the block, which I have 2 forms of measurement, continent by continent, which is equivalent to note by note within the 7 note collection, which is measured incorrectly into the current system, making that the 1, 1, 2, 3. It should be 1, 2. Or by notes, which would be equivalent to continent and ocean, 1, 2, 3. Or we can go counterclockwise. So you can go clockwise forward or counterclockwise backward. And notice the current scale degree system has a problem going backwards. We'll have to address that because backwards is a thing. So how can we use the current measuring system, which is messed up from scale degrees, because it doesn't really go backwards that easy. We'll talk about that. But you can see theoretically it should be easy. You should just go forwards or backwards. And all you need is your starting modal node and the distance in steps. So this approach allows direct measurement of interval distance without renaming notes or keys. So once we know what key we're in, then from a pitch perspective, as we go through the notes, the 7 notes, we're just going around in a circle. That's why the Nashville number system has permanent numbers. They're trying to say, why am I renaming the system relative to scale degrees as I play in different modes when they're all the same locations? And usually you're often going one way around the block, right? We're also going kind of one way like a track. But in theory, of course, we can go one way and the other way as we play our fretboard. All right, what about octaves, you might say? Notice that the reality is that there's actually a 3D dimension to our block analogy. So we can think about the note number line as we do with numbers, going infinitely up and infinitely down, but they also repeat. So the pitches repeat as we go up and down, or the notes repeat, but they're going to be in a higher octave. So it would actually be something like this. It's a spiral. So you can see this is not a perfect picture because it was made by AI, but you can see there's a form of repetition that's the same, but there's also distance. How can we work that into our traveling around the block, or traveling around the track, or traveling around our oceans and continents, but they only go around in a circle? We can add a time dimension. So once again, if I go from this 2 to this 4, that would be 1, 2 of our 7 collection of notes up, or 1, 2, 3 of our 12 notes or total notes, including continents and oceans. But what if I go around the block? I go if I do all of them, it would be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15 if I counted that right. So now it would be 15, and that's great. But if I was to ask someone directions, the local distance would still be 1, 2, 3 if I add oceans and continents. So I would say it's 3 plus an octave, which we can think of would be the time it takes to go another lap around. And that would be like saying, well, we're still in Australia, but it's not the same because it's 12. It's the time it took you to travel another 12 steps around. That would be like saying the ocean is not or the same, or the river is not the same when you step in it twice, because it's different, because time is a factor. That's how you can take this analogy and see the local distance and also add the concept of octaves as you go up an octave and get this 3D spiral. So moving an octave up or down is like going up a level in time. It's the same location, but a new layer. So that would be like going an octave up. You're still on the same, what would this be? The fourth? This would still be the 4 location, but now it's an octave up. This adds a vertical 3D element to our map. Think of it like returning to the same bend in a river, but at a different moment in time. Musically, it's an echo, not a repetition. So that's deep, right? Not just deep because it's an ocean here. It's deep because it's deep, man. We're going in the river, but the river's like not the same. So why this works better than the traditional system. So once again, here's our grid from space. This is what most people are learning. We're memorizing the fretboard, and we're memorizing all the points on the fretboard, and we're trying to use our intervals to look at all the distances between all 12 notes on the fretboard, which is great, but it doesn't give us any context. Even if we learned all that, we would still have to learn the collections of notes that are in context of all this 12 different collections of notes. It's not the optimal way to learn it, and it's a frustrating way to learn it. It doesn't help you to build songs as easily or chords or scales or anything. And that's what most people are doing. That's going to be very discouraging. Again, that would be like playing Zelda, and every time you go back to the Zelda game, all of the continents look like they're in a different location because you're looking at a grid from space, and the Zelda world keeps spinning around, and you want to have a grid that's on the Zelda world. So traditional note-based navigation is like floating a map grid in space and letting the world spin beneath it. So it's hard to find the location. This causes learners to constantly rename positions based on scale degrees or shifting tones. Now, one of the problems with this is that the scale degree system, because of that off by 1 measuring problem we touched in on, has all these kinds of terms which are not optimal. They lead us to thinking in things in improper ways. They force us to think like we're in different scale degrees and so on. Same with the chord naming conventions. There are better ways to name things in order to see everything in context of the continents, which is always what we're doing in Western music. We always have a collection of 7 notes. I mean, pretty much all the time. So our approach locks the grid to the world, the mode, giving you consistent intuitive reference points. Okay, practical benefits of the analogy. Anchors understanding. Modes are landmarks, making navigation easier. So you want to see basically the locations on the map. That's going to make things easier to navigate. You don't have to use the Greek names. You can call them a Nashville number system. Just realize the paradigm shift. The Nashville number system, permanent modal system, permanent numbers, is more sophisticated. That's the more musically inclined approach, the more contextual approach, the most contextually accurate way to see things. So reveals structure. Rotation shows how key changes affect position without changing relationships. So when we change keys, we can now see the whole map is the same, particularly on the guitar. It's similar on a piano, but there's different fingering because the piano has different uneven keys in terms of the length and size of them. But the same thing applies to the piano as well. So encourages modal thinking. No need to rename 1 each time you shift your center. We'll talk about why that happens. It's because of the naming convention that happened because they measured things incorrectly with the scale degrees, which messes us up a lot of ways, right? It's like having the foundation of your naming convention named by some, someone that really that didn't really think it out, right? So now we have a language system that's built on a foundation that's not quite right, which leads us, when we start building on a foundation, it doesn't seem like a big deal, but when you build on it, it leads you to thinking things that aren't actually correct. So we have to understand that so we can think about things the most optimal way. And one of the problems is with the scale degrees is it forces us to change the locations on the map from a Nashville number system, a permanent modal number system, or the Greek names, to a different name, having a different, and there's no point in doing that. That's causing all kind of problems. Same with the chord-based system, the naming system. So simplified intervals, movement and distance plus direction, not scale naming. So all we have to do is visualize it as a track. So we don't need to say that we're going from scale to scale. I'm going scale to scale. This is the one, that's the one. No, we just need to name the point and then say how far we're going in distance, measured either in note by note from the collection of 7 notes that's always in order, or by the 12 note, which would be equivalent to the continents and oceans. Conclusion: from notes to navigation, this analogy transforms the fretboard into a navigal landscape. So if you were to approach the fretboard this way, it's like playing a video game in that it's hard, but you see it contextually, it's gamified, you see why you're doing it, and it gives you, and you can have achievement goals like playing songs and playing scales a lot more quickly than if you try to learn all of the notes on the fretboards and all of the intervals between all of the notes on the fretboard without context. If you do learn all the notes, then what you're going to learn to do is play songs that are in a particular key. Like on the piano, you learn all of the notes in the key of C, and you can play a bunch of songs in the key of C, but possibly not see how to move them to other keys. On the guitar, it's even easier because everything is movable. So what you want to do is name the song not by the notes, but by the nodes, by the Nashville number system. Then you can play the song in any key. You should be able to say the entire song by the Nashville number system, by the nodes. And we'll talk about how to do that. But just think about it. Say everything that you're seeing in notes, convert it to nodes, and you'll see what I mean. If you say a song is in nodes, you can shift it easily to the 12 keys. If you say it in notes, you can't easily shift it to the 12 keys. I mean, everything, particularly on the guitar, should be movable. It's like an Excel spreadsheet. You should copy and paste it. And if it's something is not presented that way, it's not presented optimally. So stop renaming the earth every time you change your position. Start exploring the map that moves with you. So note names are like a GPS coordinates that don't tell you what kind of land you're on. So they're just telling you kind of where it is, but it's not telling you, what position, where you are in within the context of your song. So modes are continents. If you want to play music, you don't just know where you are. You want to know what's there, meaning I want to be looking at latitude and longitude when my fingers are actually on the continents that I have decided to be playing in, and then name the locations relative to the position I'm playing in, not relative to a grid that's hovering in space.